Hi everyone, my name is Emma and I'm a Visitor Experience Assistant at Guelph Museums. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Closer Look video. In this weekly video series, we have a quick discussion about a picture from our museum collection. Before you watch this video though, make sure you've done the online puzzle so you really get to know the picture that we're going to be talking about today. So today we're talking about the image that you can see on the screen. What are the first impressions you get when you look at this image? Take a second to look really closely at the picture and think about what it shows. What does it make you think about? What do you think is happening in this image? When we look at images at the museum, some of the things we want to know are when it's from and what the image can tell us about what life was like when the picture was taken. We're going to try and figure out when it's from first. What kind of clues can you see that might tell us if this is a really old picture or a newer picture? One good question to ask to help figure this out is whether this looks like a photo you might take today or not. What do you think? When you take a photo, does it look like this? I bet most pictures you take today are in color. This one is in black and white. For a long time, all photos were in black and white as nobody had the technology to make them colorful yet. So that tells us that this photo is quite old. Do you see any other clues that might tell you how old this picture is? Something I always look at when I'm figuring out how old a picture is the clothing everyone in the picture is wearing. What do you think? Do you see people wearing clothing like this today? What about their hair and their facial hair? There are lots of clues in their personal styles that can help us figure out when this is from. So what do you think? Do people look like this today? I think maybe you might see people all dressed up like this at a really fancy event like a wedding. But do these people look like they're at a fancy event? It looks to me like they're at work. People definitely don't get this dressed up for work anymore. So that tells me that this photo was probably taken quite a long time ago. When you work in a museum for a long time, like all of us at Guelph Museums, you get to know when certain clothing styles and hairstyles are from. So because I know that kind of information already, I can look at this picture and see that it's probably from the very end of the 1800s, a little over 100 years ago. Now, what's actually happening in this picture? We've already figured out that they're probably at work. Can you guess what kind of work they're doing? If you look very closely at the woman sitting farthest away from the camera, she has headphones on. Does that give you any clues? The women are all sitting in front of a board with some wires coming out of it. What do you think that is? That is something called a switchboard. Before we all had cell phones, you would pick up a big heavy phone that had a wire that was attached to an office like this, which had a switchboard. There, somebody would use a wire to attach your phone line to the phone line of the person you were talking to on that switchboard. The people who did that were called operators, and they had to be really careful to make sure that they connected you to the right person. You wouldn't want to think you were telling a secret to a friend, only to find out that the operator had connected you to the wrong person. So what can this picture tell us about the people who worked as operators? Take a look at the picture. What can you see? The first thing I notice is that all of the operators, that's all the people sitting down in front of the switchboard, are women. Why do you think that is? What do you think the other people in the room are doing? Are the men in charge or are the women in charge? Does anything in the picture give any clues about that? To me, it looks like the women are working really hard and have to stay sitting by the switchboard the whole time. The men, on the other hand, are mostly standing, and one of them is even watching the women work. It looks like they get a little bit more freedom to move around and do different jobs. Which job would you rather have? Let's see if we can figure out one more clue about this job. Do you think the people who worked here made a lot of money? Can you find any clues to help you figure that out? The best clue that I can find is the people's clothing again. Does that clothing look cheap or expensive to you? From what I know about that time period, the women have pretty fancy dresses with lots of fabrics. They probably had a little bit of spare money to spend. But at the time, not a lot of women worked. So if they needed a job, they probably weren't super wealthy. So it was probably an in-between kind of job where they made a good amount of money, but they weren't rich. Thanks for joining us today for this closer look video. Can you find any other clues about what's happening in this picture? Email us at the museum or let us know on social media by tagging us at Guelph Museums. And don't forget to join us again next week for another closer look puzzle and discussion.